In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can go about making your own shader using Shader Graph in Unity to create this cool fuse effect. And a big thank you to the amazing people over there at Patreon who are helping support my work. John Baggin, Octavia Immersive, Ruud van Reenen, Ongnan Nguyen, Onfong Choi, VR Anime Ted, Eli L, Exodus, and Harold Gunderson. Thanks very much to these people over at Patreon. They're really helping shape the channel and supporting my work, and it really does make the world of difference. So thank you so much once again. Hi, welcome back. This is my first video for 2023. And in this one, we're going to be taking a look, as I said in the intro, how we can go about making this cool shader on this fuse here that's connected to this bomb. And you can see that when we toggle this box, which is called is fuse active, it gets lit. And then if we drop down this transparency level, you can see it starts to eat away there at the fuse as it comes nearer and nearer to the bomb, and then finally, boom. This is effect is created using Shader Graph. I'm using the universal render pipeline. So let's dive right in and see how this is all put together. So the first thing with how this effect is achieved really does start at the kind of the 3D modeling level. So we've got our fuse here and our bomb as two separate objects. So this has all been modeled and unwrapped, and as it has the fuse as well. And if we open up the UVs for this fuse, you can see they're laid out here going from top to bottom on the y-axis. And this is quite important because what the shader is doing is it's getting the UV coordinates and then using that transparency level slider, we're going to be coming down the UVs here all the way to the bottom, which makes it look like it's being taken away. We're going from basically making it transparent as it moves down. How you lay out your UVs for your fuse is quite important. They need to be kind of like that, going from top to bottom along the y-axis. And then that's exported and then brought into Unity, where we've applied the shader, giving us these cool controls. And if we zoom in there on the tip of the fuse, you can see that as the shader goes, it's giving like a fire effect as it moves down and it eating away at that piece of fuse. Right click, create Shader Graph, and we're going to go URP hit Shader Graph. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call mine fuse tutorial and go ahead and hit enter. And then to open up in Shader Graph, let's go ahead and double click and it'll open up the Shader Graph window. So the first thing we're going to need to do in order to make this effect work is get the UVs of the objects. So we're going to use the UV node. I'm going to go ahead and press the spacebar, put UVs. Because our UVs are laid out whereby we have our diffuse geometry on our UV island, going from the top to the bottom, we want that y-axis. So we're going to drag out from the out node and we're going to use the split. Using the RGB here, this represents the X, Y, Z axes. So because we want the Z axis, we're going to be using the G. And dragging out from the G, which is the Y, we're going to use a step node. It's going to go to the edge. And then when I manipulate this X value here, you can see we're influencing what would be transparent and not transparent using this X value. And we can control this using a parameter. We can go up to our panel up on the left, click the plus, and we want a float. And this is going to be called our transparency. And this is going to be 1 by default. And we could use a slider for this and going from 0 to 1. And then we're going to drag that out our editor there and connect it to the in slot. We're going to go ahead and change a couple of things with our shader. We need to make sure our surface type is transparent. So as in this alpha section here, and then we can drag our out into the alpha. Okay, so that would control our alpha. Let's go ahead and save that for a second. And we'll go back to our editor, drag that away. What we're going to do on my fuse, I'm going to change it from the one I'm using by default. We go down to Shader Graphs and put it on Fuse Tutorial. You can see it's got the controls for the transparency here. When I drag the slider down, see it's eating it away. So we've already done a massive part of that tutorial really quickly. For the fiery tip, we can go ahead and use our UVs here that we're already getting out, and we can use that to generate the start of this fire effect. We can drag out from our y-axis on the split node, and we're going to put this into a subtract. With the subtract node, you've got a much softer kind of fall off rather than a hard edge with the step node. And on our shader, we want to be able to control the width of that flame, or so the amount of which it looks like it's eating into the fuse. So we're going to create a new float. We'll call it fireband width. Its default will be 5. We'll make it a slider, and the max value will be 10. I'm going to drag that out, and pop it into our X slot on the subtract node. Now we've got our transparency node. We need to move the fire tip as we move the transparency level down, so that they both move together. So we're going to take our transparency and we're going to plug it into the B slot of our subtract node. And let's give our transparency here a default value of say 0.5. And you can see how this is all working properly. So you can see here the difference between the step node and the subtract node really well. Step node is going to give you a hard edge and this subtract is going to give a bit more of a gradient. If you remember on our shader we had that kind of fire effect which made it look like it was flames were eating into the fuse a little bit. And in order to create that we're going to use like a scrolling noise texture as that fire moves down. So in order to make that, we're going to need first of all need a time node as we're going to be animating that noise map. We're going to drag the time out and put it into a multiply node. And then we're going to need to tell the noise map to scroll in a certain direction. So we're going to use a parameter for that, and it's going to be a vector free. We're going to call that scroll direction. And because by default we want it to move in the Y, we're going to put a 1 in the Y axis there. Drag that out and plug it into the B slot. Move this over slightly. So then from our multiply node, we're going to drag out and we're going to use the tiling and offset. And then from there, I'm going to press spacebar and start typing simple noise. And from our tiling and offset, we want to drag into our UV2. And then when you adjust the scale there, you'll be able to see that noise pattern scrolling around. And then if you want to control the scale of that noise in the editor, we'll go ahead and add a float. And this can be called noise scale. Click on that, and then we can use a default value that we've currently got in there at the minute, which is 147. Drag it out and plug it into the scale node. Then using the tiling and offset node, we can change the tiling if you want to create a more interesting effect. Then what I like to do to keep it all neat is select stuff that's doing a particular task. So this is all creating that animated noise map for us. So we're going to right click here and group selection, give it a name, scrolling noise. Still not an awful lot going on yet, which is good. This is quite a simple shader. I'm going to create a node here because we need to multiply a couple of things together. So we're going to create a new multiply node. I'm going to take my subtract and plug it into the top section of the multiply node. I want to put this multiply node in here because we want to be able to control the width of our fire band. So whether it's like just on the tip a little bit or whether it's eating more into the fuse. And you want to make sure, if you haven't done it already, to create a float called fire band width with a default of 5 and a max of 10, which is a slider. Drag that out and plug that into the multiply node. And we only want this fire band to be visible on a certain part of the mesh, and that's going to be visible wherever that transparency is coming down. We just want it to be visible on that tip. So in order to do that, we're going to use the color mask. So drag out from the multiply, start typing color mask, and pop it on the in node. And then once you start playing with some of these sliders, you see kind of how this works. So we've got a range here. So at the moment, everything's set to 0.5 for our transparency. But if we were to adjust this, so we make the as we change that default, you can see that bar going up and down. That's going to represent where the fire is on the color mask. It's going to start at the top, then that yellow is slowly going to eat away. So for the range, then 0.18, and then on the fuzziness, because we can control how these edges are looking. Don't want it to be like a hard band. That might be what you want. If you want a more fiery effect, we can drag out from our simple noise and plug it into our fuzziness. You can see there you've got that kind of fiery effect. And it's going way too fast at the moment because our scroll direction is on 1. You can lower that value to say 0.25 and it's going to move a little bit slower. You can see here it's starting to look a bit better in our color mask. This is what's going to be going up and down doing the fire effect. And we need to add a bit of color to this. I'm going to drag out. We're going to use an add node. And for our B value, we're going to go ahead and add a color. This is going to be our fire color. Click on it and give it a default, say orange, orangey red like that. And we want to make sure the mode is on HDR because we want it to glow a little bit. So we drag it out, plug it into the B slot, move everything over a little bit. And once we've added our color, we're going to go to out and we use a multiply node and multiply our color mask by the color. And give us the fiery edges. And then we want our shader to do something kind of funky. Let me show you what I mean. When the transparency starts to come down, you'll see that you can actually see kind of through into the fuse, and it looks kind of weird because it looks like it's capped off there at the end. Because we're eating away, the cap goes, it becomes transparent, but then you can see that inside that volume just doesn't quite look right because you can't see both sides, plus you'll be able to see into it. So in order to fix that, we can use a node called is front face. So we're kind of doing a little bit of logic. We can drag that out and use a branch node. It's like an if statement really. So if front face is visible, we can go ahead and drag our multiply node into that true, and we can use our fire color. Drag that out. This is just like a solid color. What we're saying here is that if the camera can see a face of this object that's not the front face, then we're going to assign it the fire color. Let's just see that working for a sec. Let's go ahead and drag that into the emission slot. And really cool in the preview there. We'll go ahead and save it. And you can look in our preview here, which is looking really cool. But the faces of this object that we can't see, which are technically the back faces, should be using our fire color. In order to make that happen, we need to go to our render face. First of all, you need to click on the graph settings and make sure we go down to render face and change it from front to both. See, it looks really funky, which is cool. We also want to make sure alpha clipping is enabled, and we want to change our surface type to opaque. And then we start to get the effect we're really looking for. So I think I might have told you to make that surface type transparent. I lied. Actually, it needs to be on opaque for this to work properly. We're going to go ahead and click save. Then go back to our shader. And now you can no longer see through the object. We can control that fire bandwidth. You can see that working already. Look, we've got massive fire, or you can have little fire. So we're just going to go a little bit at the end. And then as you move that transparency down, you can see it kind of eating away. And now because we're looking at the front faces, they've also got the fire color assigned. It looks as though you can't see into or through that object. It looks complete no matter where you are in that shader. Then once you turn on the post-processing, there's no way of knowing anyway. Oh, working really well. So you could kind of leave it done there. Problem with this is that it's always on. You've always got that kind of fire thing going on at the tip. And we can use a little bit of logic to control that. Crack open our shader again here. I'm just going to temporarily remove where we just set up our emission. Remove that connection. And we're going to go ahead in our parameters here. We're going to make a new one. And it's going to be a Boolean. And we're going to call this is fuse active. And by default, it's not. So we'll leave it off. And we'll drag that out to here. And we're going to use another branch. So we click on there. Press spacebar. Start typing branch. Our predicate is our Boolean here. So it's got a true or false. So if our fuse is active, then we want to use our cool fuse colors. If it's not, we just want it to be kind of black. We don't do anything with the emission. So we'll just drag that out now and plug that into our emission slot. Then click save asset. Go back. And now you see our fuse isn't active until we click the box, and then it turns it on, and we can start to remove that. So if this was a game, for instance, you'd probably have a script that sat on this object, and as soon as you threw the bomb or you activated the bomb, this Boolean would check, and then you'd also control the transparency slider either through animation, or you could do it through script as well. So for those of you that don't know and want to include textures, to do so, we're going to go ahead and click on the plus. We're going to go to texture 2D, and we'll call this albedo. Drag it up to the top, drag it into our editor, connect it out to a sample texture 2D, and drag the RGBA into our base color. The same for a normal map. Texture 2D, normal, the top, drag it out, sample texture 2D, change the type from default to normal, and put that into our normal slot. Organize it, tidy it all up. Go back to Unity, see it's automatically assigned the textures in there for us. As soon as our fuse is active, turns it on, and we can control the transparency as it gets eaten away. And then you can add to this, so you can have like a little particle effect coming down. That would be pretty cool. I think this is a pretty good start into that effect. So a very simple little shader. will look really cool in your games. And I'm actually using this as part of a Udemy course I'm writing at the moment for an escape room where you've got a cannon and you have to light the fuse and it slowly gets eaten away. And thought I would share it with you guys on how it was made. So I hope you enjoyed watching it and found it useful. So if you like what you've seen and you found it useful, then please consider a subscription. Really helps out the channel. And take a look at my Patreon page as well, where there's lots of cool projects and free stuff for you to have a look at. Take care and I'll see you in the next one.